The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Yaron Brook Show. Thank you for joining me on this, what is it? It's a Tuesday night, I guess. It's Tuesday. I assume you could hear the music because I know that before you couldn't hear anything. And, I kind of figured out what the problem was. The problem was that I updated OBS. OBS is the software that collects the video and collects the audio and feeds it to another piece of software to a website called Restream. And then Restream ships out the signals to YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and everywhere else. And I updated OBS this evening, a new version, and that's always risky. Always test software before you start using it once it's updated. And it wasn't receiving an audio signal. I mean, and it's not because all the settings are right. It's just not. It's like there's something blocked. It's not receiving it. So all I did was I quit the program. I quit OBS, opened it back up, and lo and behold, everything works now. Sound is perfect. So I don't know what the lesson learned there is. I guess test stuff out before you start a live show. But I was using. I guess I wasn't using. I was earlier on Skype using the same audio equipment and the same camera, but it was through Skype, so it all worked. So I didn't even think. And of course, I've used this. Okay, the lesson learned is when updating software, test before use. Test before use. All right, I apologize. We started 10 minutes late. I am going to have to go back and get rid of all that section of video that was, I'm sure, amusing to many of you, but actually was not very amusing to me and not fun for new people to come on. So I will edit all that out so that we can have a clean piece of video for anybody who wants to listen to this later. But anyway, today we are talking healthcare. Primarily, we're talking Medicare-for-all. We're talking about Democratic proposals to have Medicare-for-all, and in particular, the infighting going on among Democrats right now between those who want Medicare-for-all and those who want a public option. Biden, who wants a public option, which is Medicare for anybody who wants it, but you can still keep private health care. And those like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders who want Medicare for everybody, no private insurance. And maybe there's a third option where everybody gets Medicare, but then you can buy supplemental insurance. And we'll talk a little bit about what you could buy supplemental insurance for, what kind of things you would get that, and whether the Democrats would really, once it was implemented, really allow for that. So we're going to use, for our discussion here, we're going to use a video presentation by Sam Seder, who is a Bernie, I think, supporter, a Bernie supporter, a progressive leftist who is a big advocate for Medicare for all. And he's going to explain to us why the public option, why a public option wouldn't work, or maybe, or whatever. He's gonna raise some of the issues for us. And my job is to criticize pretty much everything he says. So we're gonna go through this video. It's about 8 minutes and 39 seconds. I don't know. It might take us a couple of hours to go through this because I have 5 minutes to say about every 30 seconds of these guys have to express. All right, now I don't know. YouTube is playing up, is having problems, but anyway, hopefully it works. And if not, we at least have a Facebook feed. I don't know what's going on today. I have a feeling that this new version of OBS, version 24.0.2, I think the technical term is sucks. So I think for some people the video is frozen. For other people it is not. I don't know. Anyway, we will see. Hopefully you get audio, which is the more important part. And I really don't know. Facebook doesn't seem like it has frozen video. YouTube seems like it might, but I'm not going to stop. We're just going to keep going. All right. I would refresh. I will restart YouTube over here, see if that has an impact, and see where we are. All right. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to play the video. And we're going to comment. You know the drill. We've done this before. So this is Sam Seder. You know, he's got his podcast called Majority Report. Just, you know, again, to give you a sense of the world in which we live. And now, his production values are very good, so you'll see that. But to give you a sense of the world in which we live, I have 16,000-something subscribers. Sam has 688,000 subscribers. So not just some minor, you know, second class. I mean, important guy within this world of commentary on the progressive side, and we're gonna, you know, see what he has to say. And by the way, think about, what do you prefer, Medicare-for-all or or just a public option that is a part of Obamacare, which is if you can't buy health insurance in the private markets, you can basically get it from the government. You pay something, but you get it from the government. So it's guaranteed. Everybody gets health insurance, and the payment is really, really low, and if you don't have any money, you get it for free. Here we go.
This is interesting. When we talk about Joe Biden's desire to add a public option.
They hate Joe Biden, by the way.
To the Affordable Care Act. Even one that people could buy into. As opposed to just being limited, as the ACA is now, to people who don't have an option of getting health insurance through their employer or any other way, and subsidies only being available up to a certain percentage of wealth. And
so the idea again is that the public option would allow anybody to get health insurance. It would be completely subsidized, so it wouldn't be capped. It would be completely subsidized, and it would be run by the government. That is, it would be an extension of Medicare, which is really, really important. And as you'll see, Sam is not a fan of this because he's a Bernie fan. He wants Medicare-for-all.
Country, a certain percentage of poverty, and the idea that costs are crazy. The real question is, like, how do you cut costs? Well, here is the former Medicare administrator, Dr. Don Berwick.
So the big issue is, with all these discussions about healthcare, is costs. Health care in the United States, supposedly, the Democrats, the progressives argue, is very, very expensive. Costs are through the roof. They're really, really expensive. So how do we cut costs? And he's going to refer to a testimony that Obama's healthcare expert made in front of Congress, when Obamacare was being passed, who is going to argue that the public option would not cut costs, which is true.
This is under Obama. He explains why the public option at a House hearing will not be sufficient for containing medical costs.
I'm a little worried about the public option for a kind of technical reason. Insurance companies want to provide insurance to people that don't need it.
That is such a bogus argument. I mean, insurance companies don't want to provide insurance to people that don't need it. Insurance companies want to know to what extent you're going to need the coverage and want to have visibility into that so that they can effectively price the insurance. But this idea that insurance companies scour the universe and only insure people who don't need insurance. Well, we all need insurance. That's why we all buy insurance. And we don't know whether we're going to need it or not. But the idea that insurance companies won't insure unhealthy people, they'll insure unhealthy people, they'll just expect to be paid for the risk that they're taking on. So this presentation of insurance as if auto insurance companies only want to insure people who will never have an accident. Well, no. They're willing to insure, and they take into account that they will insure people who are going to have an accident. They just want to have an effective way to price that so that they can make a profit off of insuring people like that. So this is it's a sneaky way of saying, oh, these insurance companies, they don't care about sick people. Of course they care about sick people. They just want to know how sick you're going to be so that they can price it, so that they don't lose money overall on insuring the whole pool.
That's how they make money. And so anything...
No, they make money by creating a pool from whom they charge more and invest the money, and the investment plus what they charge you is more than what you're going to get when you get sick. That's how they make money. They don't make money by insuring only people who are never going to get sick, because nobody never gets sick. And we don't know who's never going to get sick. I mean, it's like, sure, insurance companies would rather their home not burn down. I mean, you would rather your home not burn down. And some homes have a higher risk of burning down, and some homes have a lower risk of burning down. And insurance companies would like to charge you enough to compensate for the risk that your house might burn down because it has a higher probability, and the other home is safer in some way. It's not in a fire zone, and therefore they would charge them less. And overall in their pool, and given the ability to invest the money, they want to make money over time, not on any particular person who is insured. On some people, they lose a lot of money. But overall, over the entire pool, they have to make money. That's how insurance works. But this is a way of couching insurance as if it's if it's in a free market, there would never be insurance for people who have high fire risk. No, there would be. They would just be charged based on the risk. And yes, the insurance company would lose money on some of those. And they know that. But that's why they put it in a pool, and that's why other people, they're going to make more money on than they're going to lose on you, and overall they're going to make money. It's just a sneaky way of presenting insurance that is half true, but plays into the population's kind of distrust and dislike of insurance companies.
Done to game risk, so
The
that
public option would be used by all the people who really need the insurance
and
the
if I were
most.
But that, by the way, is not the insurance company. That's us as human beings gaming the risk. That is, if you offer me insurance that is unrelated to the risk of me getting sick, or insurance that is unrelated to the risk of me getting a fire, and you make it cheap, then of course I'm going to go with you rather than go to a commercial insurance company that's actually going to price the policy based on the risk. So if I'm obese and have a high risk, therefore, of diabetes and cancer and heart disease, then my health insurance is going to cost a lot of money, should cost a lot of money, because my risk of getting a disease is high. And of course, if somebody else offers me a cheaper policy, certainly if they offer me a free policy, I'm going to go with that. So it's not insurance companies gaming the system. It's by the government introducing a free or low-cost alternative that is not risk-based, that is, does not categorize people based on risk. They are the ones that are creating an untenable insurance market. They are basically destroying insurance. And that's what Obamacare to a large extent did. It destroyed insurance. So what you're getting is not insurance. What you're getting is just a mechanism of redistribution of wealth from healthy people to sick people. That's not what insurance is. That's not what insurance is. As soon as you take risk pricing out, as soon as you offer an alternative that is not based on risk, or you prohibit the insurance companies from using risk as a criteria, it's not insurance anymore. It's just another mechanism of redistribution of wealth. So it's so dishonest, because these are not idiots. And of course, what is he doing? He's blaming insurance companies. He says the way insurance companies game the system. No, it's the way government destroys the insurance market.
How they make money. And so anything that can be done to game risk so that
Public option would be used by all the people who really need the insurance
and
the
if I
most.
were insurance companies would then try to find ways to have people who really need care go to the public option, which would enrich. It'd be a good business case for them, and that's not good for the country.
It's not what happens. It's not the insurance companies trying to get them to go onto the public option. That is what the incentives mean. That's what has to, by necessity, happen. If I tell you, you pay, because you're likely to be sick, you have to pay $1,000, and the government is giving you a policy for $100, you're going to go with the government policy. That's just market incentives. That's just human incentives. But it's much easier, instead of saying government has just destroyed the insurance market, to say greedy insurance companies are manipulating the public to force them into government policies. And by the way, if all the sick people go into the public option, what happens? Prices in the public option go through the roof. It's not sustainable. And cost of Medicare expand dramatically.
So look, I mean, this is an extension of the argument as to why you can have private insurance if you have Medicare for all. It just needs to be supplemental to what is offered in the context of Medicare for all.
So this is where the Democrats are going to come down. You've got to have Medicare for all. Everybody has access to Medicare, and everybody's on Medicare automatically. You don't get to choose. And then if you want for special things, and we'll see he struggles to figure out what those special things are. If you want for special things, you can buy, gold-plated insurance on top of the government Medicare that you're going to get. That is what Medicare for all, that's the only plan that works, because the problem with the public option is exactly what this guy said. All the highest risk, all the highest cost patients go to the public option, bankrupt the Medicare system. It's bankrupt anyway, we'll get to that. And the insurance companies make a lot of money because they have all the healthy patients. That's exactly what would happen. But that's not the insurance company's fault. That's the fault of the people designing the system.
And because if you have it compete with Medicare for all, the insurance companies are going to try, and I don't know if they'd be able to do it if Medicare for all existed and you still had competing insurance. I mean, I guess in my mind, it's an open question. For some, it's not. As to whether you would have enough people who enter into the Medicare for all program so that the risk pool, that is all the people who are involved in the program, is the risk is dispersed amongst more people.
Yeah, they need healthy and sick people in Medicare for all to make it somewhat work. It still doesn't work, and we'll get to that, but somewhat work.
The whole nature of insurance in terms of health, anyways, and probably
not true.
Other, I mean, this is just the way insurance works. It's a small number of people who are going to be responsible for the highest number of costs.
That is true, but smart insurance, all insurance companies that is not regulated by government, prices risk in advance to the extent that they have information about the risk. If you speed, and I believe in a free market, there'd be even more ways in which they would put you would get a discount. if you on your auto insurance, I think there are actually auto insurance companies that do this today. You would get a discount if you agreed to have a GPS tracker on your car, and if you drove well, if they estimated that you're driving safely, you would get a discount on your car insurance. And if you were driving like a maniac, they would raise your premiums. The same thing with health insurance. They would actually evaluate your health. And to the extent that you were likely to be using a lot of health care, your premium would be higher than if you were jogging all the time. I guess if you assume jogging is good for you, you're healthy, eating well, we're keeping lean, we're building muscle. If you were actually practicing a healthy lifestyle, your insurance costs would be lower. Now, it strikes me that even if you put aside the economics, isn't that just virtuous? If somebody behaves in ways that reduce their risk of disease, shouldn't they, in justice morally, shouldn't they have to pay less for ensuring their health in the future than people who don't? All insurance is risk-based. Otherwise, it's non-insurance. It's not just we have a big pool, some are high risk, some are low risk, we don't know who they are. We just randomly have a big pool and somehow it works. It's not insurance. That's not the business of insurance. That's what government does. That's what government does. Because government can't price it differently. Government prices it all the same. So Medicare, is based on your income, not on your risk. The more income you have, the more you pay into the system. And yet, you get the same benefits as somebody who paid little into the system. You get in whether you're healthy or unhealthy, makes no difference. You pay based on your income. So all it is a way to penalize rich people. And it's not insurance. Medicare is not unequivocally insurance. It's a massive redistribution scheme. From rich to poor, from young to old. That's what Medicare is. Rich to poor, young to old. And you might be okay with redistribution systems, but don't kid yourself that Medicare is somehow an insurance. It has none of the characteristics of an insurance.
But the point is, we don't know who those people will be over the course of a lifetime.
But you could know. You could know. You could take their blood pressure. You could take their weight. You could take their blood. You could, oh my God, now I'm going to say something completely unacceptable. You could even check their DNA and see how susceptible they are to diseases. Imagine a true free market where insurance companies asked you if you're willing to give your DNA, and if the DNA turned out to be on the healthy side, that is, you were less susceptible to certain diseases, you would get really, really cheap coverage. And if your DNA sucked, then you would have more expensive coverage. But that makes sense. That makes sense. Now, it's true. The risk is not your fault, not there. It just is. But so what? Insurance companies should take all the available information into account in pricing insurance. Now, even with DNA, there's no guarantee that you will be sick. Now, there's also other options. What about pre-existing conditions? Somebody on the left would jump up. Well, one thing that a free market would supply, and this makes complete sense, is you would be able to buy pre-existing condition insurance. That is insurance that covered you against losing your insurance policy if you had pre-existing conditions. For example, you could buy it before the baby was born. And again, even that insurance might be priced based on risks, based on the parent's lifestyle, based on the parent's DNA. So, once you have a free market, the options are unbelievable in terms of what becomes available to you. What becomes available to you, right? All right, by the way, studying somebody's DNA is not racist. It has nothing to do with race. It has to do with your specific individual DNA. And if fat is associated with lack of health, then fat is associated with lack of health. We are objectivists. We look at facts, nothing else. Facts. Not collectives, not insulting people, just looking at facts. All right, let's see what Sam has to say.
Now, once you've identified them, if you're the insurance company and you want to insure people, you want to make sure those people are not part of your risk pool.
Why not? If you can charge them more, you might be able to still make money off of them.
And you want to offload them.
You can only offload them if there's some way to offload them to, like a state-run program that doesn't care about risk because it's not insurance.
And if you offload them into a system where only a certain number of people are paying into the system because they're buying in as opposed to it being taxation on everyone, you'll have a higher percentage of people who will need the service, and that's when insurance breaks down.
It's amazing how even progressives understand some limited basic economic principles. Incentives work when they think it serves their cause. Then incentives work. I guess they understand that when you offer something for free relative to offering something that's expensive, and what the expensive is priced based on risk and the free stuff is not based on risk, then everybody who is high risk will go to the free stuff. That they get. But they don't get that when you offer homeless people free housing, they're going to be more homeless people because you've offered something free. So there are going to be more people who want the free stuff. So people are going to leave their homes, stop paying rent, become homeless in order to gain the free stuff that you're offering them, which is exactly what's happening in LA right now and in California, because there's so much free stuff being offered that, you know, in the short run, it might be worth being homeless.
So I think the question of private insurance is overblown. Everybody needs to pay into the system. They want to get a different insurance program, that's fine. But I also think you need to make like the vast majority of doctors and service providers also be part of the system.
Now, this is important because everybody talks about how much Medicare-for-all is going to cost. Everybody talks about increases in taxes. And I don't think that's the issue. Even from an economic perspective, I don't think the fact that taxes will have to go up is the issue. And I think you'll find that once Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders offer their plans, they will have all kinds of ways in which taxes don't go up that much and they only go up on the rich. And if you take out all the premiums you have to pay for health insurance and you get to keep those, then what they're going to argue is if you just take that amount and you pay it into Medicare, then your taxes are not going to go up beyond what you're already paying for health insurance. So the issue is not with Medicare for all what is going to happen to taxpayers as taxpayers. Now, you all know I think the issue is morality, but we're going to put even the morality aside. We're going to focus on what is the real economic damage of Medicare for all. And it's not taxes. All right, let's see what he says here, because this is important.
Easy to do, I think. You can't be you can't get accreditation unless you take a certain percentage of Medicare patients. And at that point, if everybody's paying in and everybody has access to the same doctors,
egalitarianism.
Really doesn't matter, in my mind, what happens with private insurance or not.
Now notice, what they want to do and what Medicare for all, if you have Medicare for all, then if there's no private insurance, then doctors have to treat Medicare patients because that's all there is. Now what he's saying is even if you have a private insurance, what you have to do is force doctors, and I emphasize force, coerce doctors into taking a certain number of Medicare patients. Later on in the clip, he will say that he means like 80-90% of their patients should be Medicare patients. Now, what does this actually do? So notice that behind Medicare-for-all is a massive, massive scheme to coerce doctors, hospitals, drug companies, biotech companies, all the entire medical production. The real damage of Medicare-for-all is not the taxes. The real damage is to the producers of healthcare. And this is something nobody ever talks about. Healthcare is something that has to be produced. Somebody has to produce healthcare, whether it's doctors, whether it's pharmaceutical companies, whether it's pharmacists, whether it's scientists, whether it's biotech companies, medical device inventors and companies, hospitals, nurses. Healthcare has to be produced by all these people. Now today, before we get Medicare for all, today we have about 121 million people. Let me say that again. 121 million people today are on either Medicare or Medicaid. It's about 53 million people over 65 who are on Medicare, and about 68 million people on Medicaid. 121 million people on Medicaid and Medicare. Another 177 million people on commercial insurance. So today what happens is, the people on Medicare and Medicaid, when they go see a doctor or they go to the hospital, Medicare and Medicaid pays the bill. Now what does that mean? That means that the doctor doesn't get what he wants. The doctor doesn't get what he negotiates. The doctor doesn't necessarily get enough money to cover his costs. What the doctor and the hospital get, and if drug companies, if Medicare negotiates as a plan with drug companies, same thing will happen with drug companies. What they get is what Medicare decides they get. And often what Medicare decides they get is below their costs. Indeed, the reason healthcare is so expensive for all of us who have private insurance, because not only are we subsidizing Medicare and Medicaid for people through our taxes, we are subsidizing people on Medicare and Medicaid through the cost of healthcare. We are subsidizing it because the doctor, on average, gets 22% less from Medicare than from private insurance. 22% less. Now, in some specialities, they get 75% less. They get 25 cents on the dollar. So in general, when a Medicare patient comes to see a doctor, they get paid ridiculously low rates. Well, they need to survive. You know, getting a medical degree is, 7 years of college, it's residency, it's massive student loans, and these are really, really smart people who probably could have gone into become lawyers, become programmers, become a whole array of different fields. They have to make a profit. They have to make a return on all the investment that they've made in their profession. Well, Medicaid comes in and prices it below at a rate that's not profitable. So what do they have to do? They raise prices on the rest of us. So all of us who have private insurance are paying way more than we should to subsidize Medicare and Medicaid. Now imagine, now that is true in hospitals, where massively Medicare and Medicaid pay sometimes right now 40% less than what private insurance does. 40% less than what private insurance does. That's true in every aspect of the healthcare industry. Now, what does Medicare-for-all do? Medicare-for-all, instead of taking 177 million people, subsidizing 121 million people, which is damn immoral, evil, disgusting, horrific, nasty, and the result is a very high cost of healthcare for those of us on private healthcare. But on top of that, once you have Medicare for all, everybody is now in the Medicare-Medicaid pool. That means every dollar spent on healthcare is 20, 40, 75% less than what would be spent with private insurance, which means doctors now can't make up the losses from taking Medicare patients. Now, they're just losing money. Now, what does that do? That means doctors stop working, retire early, don't go to medical school, don't try. Why bother? You're not going to be paid for it. You're not going to get a return for it. And indeed, the political, as healthcare costs expand and as more and more people retire and they go, well, everybody's on Medicare, but they use more healthcare, so the costs go up. What do you think is going to happen? The government's going to have all these expenses. What are they going to do? They're going to start cutting. But they're not going to cut explicitly. They're not going to say, we're not going to pay for your appendix. We're not going to pay for your cancer. What they're going to say is, oh, no, we'll continue to pay. But we're going to pay the doctors less. We're going to pay the hospitals less. We're going to pay less for an MRI. We're going to pay less for the drugs. And what's that going to result in? Less profitability for doctors, hospitals, drug companies, healthcare providers, producers of all kinds. Less profitability for them, if any. Some of them go out of business. Some of them, retire, which is like going out of business. Others just lower the quality. You can see that in Puerto Rico where there's a shortage of doctors. What happens? Huge waiting lines. They only have 10 minutes per patient. They can't treat you properly. They can't give you the proper time. I mean, the doctors are trying. They're good doctors. They really make an effort, but they can't. They're making something like $15 per patient. Well, how many patients a day do you have to see if you're only going to make $15 per patient? A lot. A lot. Now, quality of care goes down. MRI facilities shut down. Hospitals shut down. And because there's less profit, if any, there's almost no research being done. And what happens with Medicare for all, which is much worse, much, much, much worse than the taxes, is the entire production of healthcare collapses. It collapses. And particularly if you don't want immigrant doctors who are willing to work for cheap, it completely is gone. This is why there's shortages of doctors in many European countries. This is why you have to wait in line. This is why healthcare is rationed. And this is why there's no medical innovation, or barely any medical innovation, outside the United States. Because there's no profits to be had. Why would I innovate if I can't benefit from it? So, Medicare for all is not just a problem that our taxes are going to go up. Who cares? I mean, I care. But as long as I can get good health care, if I have to pay higher taxes, I don't care. What's really, really, really bad about Medicare for all is that it will cause a complete collapse. Well, at least a slow, steady, systematic deterioration in the production side. And that's the side progressives and on the right have no conception of. Somebody said on the chat that there's now an article in the National Review, a conservative approach to Medicare for all. Yeah. Collectivists don't care. They don't understand economics. They don't care about producers. They don't care what it does to doctors. They don't understand the role of the mind. They don't understand why doctors need freedom. Hospitals need freedom. Drug companies need freedom. Medical device inventors and manufacturers need freedom. in order to continue to innovate, to continue to expand, to continue to produce great products. What else happens? Well, doctors now only have 10 minutes to see you. In those 10 minutes, they can't really think. All they do is follow government guidelines for particular treatments of the particular symptoms you seem to have. There's no in-depth analysis. There's no innovations. There's no thinking outside of the box. There's no... If you ever seen the series House, years and years ago, House, there are no houses. Nobody can afford a house. Well, you can't afford a house because it's Medicare-for-all. Everybody gets the same. Everybody sees the same doctors. That's what Sam said. The whole idea of socialized medicine, the whole idea of Medicare-for-all is disgustingly immoral. It's destructive. It's anti-life. It's anti-healthcare. And everybody suffers. Everybody suffers. And it's, again, not because taxes go up. It's because production, both in quantity and in quality, plummets, goes down because you can't pay for it. And because centralized planning, centralized payment systems, which are basically centralized planning, dictate one-size-fits-all medicine. So the whole dream of life extension, the whole dream of living long, healthy lives is the idea of personalized medicine. Medicine that is personalized to you, to your DNA, to your particular health needs, that there is no one-size-fits-all. Medicare-for-all is one-size-fits-all medicine. Socialized medicine is one-size-fits-all medicine. And it is a disaster, and it would cripple progress, and it would make it impossible for us to achieve that personalized medicine that would allow us to live a long, long time into the future. All right, let's listen to a little bit more of Sam. I'm not sure there's much more to be had from this, but let's see.
But Natalie Shore actually, though, made some really important points about this, that it basically, if you still have a system where doctors, and she's much heavier in the details, I think, probably than any of us, certainly me.
Oh, yeah.
You still have
She's
a
wonk
system.
on Medicare-for-all.
She's brilliant. And if you have a system where basically you need to have the doctors only billed to Medicare.
Yeah. The doctors become government employees. That's what billing to Medicare is. That's what they don't want to say. But what you're basically doing is nationalizing the healthcare profession. You're making all doctors government employees, open to government, to dictates from the government, because government is their only source of revenue. They become slaves of the state. They do what the state tells them because their livelihood is completely and utterly dependent on the state, on Medicaid. Even the procedures they prescribe are going to be determined by the state. You want your health care that way? You're insane.
Essentially, because that cuts there's additional, like, the real clarifying distinction of Medicare for all is free at the point of entrance, right? Like, you just need to have a system that eliminates the possibility of people having to pay deductibles and copays when...
Notice that they want to eliminate deductibles and copays. Why? In every other insurance, we have deductibles and copays. Fire insurance, car insurance. I mean, one of the problems is that we don't treat, even today, even under the so-called private health system, we don't treat health insurance like regular insurance. We should. And if we did, we wouldn't have problems with our insurance the way we do. But they don't care about the doctors. And they actually don't care about you, the patient. They have some myopic view, and this is true of all progressives and socialists. And true of many conservatives, by the way. Production just happens. Stuff just gets produced. Healthcare is always going to be there. Doctors will always give you the best treatment possible. MRIs will be everywhere. Drugs will be invented, no problem. Then they say the only question is, how do we distribute the goodies? There is zero understanding on both the left and the right on our political spectrum of where stuff comes from. The theme of Atlas Shrugged is the role of the mind in human survival. in human life. Atlas Shrugged is a book about where the stuff comes from. Atlas Shrugged is a book about innovators, creators, producers, and what is required for them. And what they need is simple. What they need is freedom. What they need is the mind to be unshackled. What they need is to be able to think and produce, which means act based on their thoughts to solve problems. Problems of human survival or human health in this case. Any constraints on them will lower production and will destroy production. And some of them will go galt, which means retire, go on strike, leave. But most of them will just shut down their mind, keep working, but without thinking, which means you leave the world to the oven boils of healthcare. The oven boils of healthcare. That's who will provide healthcare. Mindless automatons, mindless bureaucrats. And that's what these people want. This is not a disagreement about economics. This idea of Medicare for all is an evil idea. It will destroy your life. It already, government involvement in healthcare is destroying our lives. But this would be utter destruction, and the whole world would be destroyed because all the innovation, all the progress we made here in the US, they leech off of. They expropriate. They use without paying for it. But what happens when we don't exist, when there's nobody to leech off because there's no freedom in America anymore? The entire global healthcare system will deteriorate dramatically and fast. I mean, there are already big problems in the NHS. Take away the American healthcare system, the NHS is spiraling downwards and out of control. I mean, I think countries will start privatizing their healthcare systems. That will be the consequence, if there's any sanity left in the world.
Seek treatment. We all understand that, it goes through the tax dollars, of course, but it needs to eliminate the capacity of the system to charge people at the point of purchase or create any additional layers of bureaucracy. So, I mean, her argument basically is like, sure, if there wants to be like a private insurance plan that deals with things that are not primary essential medical care, like that maybe deals with,
facelifts, let's say.
Sure.
Right.
That's when we can all, sure.
So right now, they're talking about cosmetic surgery and LASIK. Right now, cosmetic surgery and LASIK are not covered by insurance. They're exactly the kind of things that insurance doesn't cover. And yet, what happens to the prices of those? Because they're not regulated. It is plummeted. Plummeted. If you want to enhance your breasts, if you want to do a facelift, if you want Botox, those are all getting cheaper all the time. If you want LASIK, cheaper all the time. It's only all the other medical procedures that are covered by Medicare and Medicaid that are getting more and more and more expensive because we in the private market have to compensate for the fact that Medicare and Medicaid are underpaying for those. So, yeah, I don't think we need to watch the whole video. I mean, it really is, this whole Medicare for all is really a scheme to destroy the profession, to destroy our lives, and, to basically make healthcare, to wipe it out. Because it wipes out the production side. And again, I'll emphasize this more general point. Most economists, most political thinkers think that production just happens and that economics is a science that distributes the goodies under scarcity. No. Economics is the science that studies how people create stuff and then how they trade it. Economics is the study of production and trade. And scarcity is constantly alleviated by production and trade. Scarcity is not what you study. Scarcity is boring. Yeah, things are scarce. That's not interesting. Things are scarce. How do we distribute what we have? That's not economics. It's a question of, okay, things are scarce. People still want some of these things. How do we produce the things? How do we produce things that expand the number of people who get it and still make money at it? All right. So that's my analysis of Sam Seder's and a whole analysis of the whole, I guess, public option, the whole Medicare-for-all question. I'm open to Super Chat questions, so feel free to ask questions in the Super Chat. The first one is, if we do get a public option system, would it be immoral to use the public option, or should we use it because we pay for it, into it? Yeah, I mean, you're paying into it, and it can't be immoral to use the system that the government creates where it is basically destroying the options for you. Like, the government takes 12% of my income every month and puts it into Social Security. That's 12% I can't save. They've destroyed my capacity to save. So why wouldn't I use my Social Security when I get it? It's the money I would have saved. They did it. They destroyed it. So if the private option, public option exists, but the whole way in which they've structured healthcare is destroying private insurance, then you can't be expected to play their game on their terms. You do what's best for you, given the way they've distorted the marketplace. So absolutely it's moral. Not only if you paid for it through your taxes, but even if you haven't paid for it through your taxes, what options do you have? Like, I mean, you would say the same thing. Is it moral for you to drive on the roads because the government owns them? Well, of course it is. And assume you're too young to have ever paid taxes. Of course it is. It's not the fact that you pay taxes that make it okay for you to use the roads. It's the fact that the government has monopolized that, has taken it over, and they give you no option. If you want to live, you have to use the roads. Even if you don't pay any taxes, and they institute Medicare-for-all, of course it's moral for you to use Medicare-for-all, because what option do you have? And the same with Social Security, the same with any of these government plans. They have destroyed your life. They have reduced your options. They have forced you into a position with this is what you have. So, you know, it truly is, the state of the world is their fault. The fact that you are now in a position where you can't afford anything but what they've left you, the crumbs that they've left you, is their fault. Take it on. Take it on. Plus, if you're even half productive, you will pay in taxes much more than what you will consume. All right. Can you recommend any history writers about the Italian Renaissance, specifically interested in trade and banking, but generally as well? No, unfortunately. In California, I have some books that I have, particularly on trade and banking, but I cannot remember their titles. And in terms of general history of the Renaissance, I don't right now. I wish I did, because I'm interested in that as well. Although, again, my reading list is so long, and I'm not reading enough. But I'd love to read more about the Renaissance. So, unfortunately not. If my next trip to California, maybe I'll write down some of the books that I have there that relate to the money and banking aspect of the Renaissance, and I'll be able to recommend it then. All right, I think you've said, and we're open for anything you want to ask in the Super Chat. I think you've said an objectivist government should not influence the realm of ideas. How can it do that while also deciding how to direct the military and how to define property rights, private property? I mean, it's really simple. The job of a government is to protect the lives and property. Let's take military first. Lives and property of Americans. It's not an ideological issue, whether, or it doesn't convey an ideology, whether somebody is a threat to you or not. Somebody flies airplanes into buildings on 9/11. The job of the government is now to analyze objectively, free of any ideological viewpoint, objectively analyze who flew, who motivated them, who inspired them, who funded them, who armed them, who made all this possible. Then figure out how you can destroy them, how you can make sure, in whatever way is possible, again, completely from a objective perspective, what would prevent this from happening again? Not, well, we thoroughly study Islam and declare Islam a religion of hate, and therefore we're going to declare war on all of Islam. That's non-objective, and it's not the job of government to declare an ideology. These people struck the towers. What do they advocate? Oh, they advocate these points. Who else advocates these points? Who funded them? Who directly inspired them? Where did these ideas come from? And it's unlikely that an analysis like that would say Islam. No, it's Iran and Saudi Arabia who advocate for a particular version of Islam which emphasizes jihad and emphasizes force. It is the money from Saudi Arabia, the money and the inspiration from Iran. It was the Wahhabi preachers who advocate for this. And then there are other groups that agree with Al-Qaeda, like Hezbollah and Hamas and Islamic Jihad and on and on and on you go. Those are the groups and those are the countries that are the enemy. That is what needs to be destroyed. One doesn't have to have an ideological perspective on the Nazis. Nazism is a threat to the United States, objectively, whatever you think about the ideology. And you don't have to have a counter-ideology. All you have to know from the perspective of government, not from the perspective of advocate, intellectual philosopher, from the perspective of government. You have to know their threat, that threat must be destroyed. It's not that communism, it's the Soviet Union is a threat. Communism in Vietnam, for example, was not a threat to the United States. Therefore, we should never go into war in Vietnam. Just like Islam in Indonesia is not a threat. It's Islam in Iran and Islam in Saudi Arabia and maybe Islam in Afghanistan and Pakistan. You'd have to really analyze the situation and figure it out. But it's not to launch then an ideological war. What you need is to know the ideology, know how it's motivating the people, and focus on destroying the capacity to motivate them. That's it. Now, what was the second question is private property. Again, you have to define what private property is, and there has to be a constitution that helps define that and makes it clear. And then it's a question of legal minds, legal philosophers, if you will, to figure out how do we apply this principle of private property to this new case brought up by the internet, to oceans, to water, to lakes, to fisheries, to things like that. Now that requires creativity, but it doesn't require having a whole philosophy. It requires applying a principle to the concrete, which is not easy, very difficult. But that's what a legislature would be responsible for. And the legislature does not have to be objectivist. It just has to understand what the Constitution means by individual rights and by private property. So they have to be influenced by objectivism. And ideally, they would even be objectivists. But they wouldn't be advocating for objectivism. They wouldn't be advocating for particular ideas. It would be, this is the Constitution. This is the proper definition of these ideas of individual rights, property rights. We don't have to get into whether there's a God or not, or what the right epistemology is and how. All we have to do is now apply this principle and apply it right. So they would have to have a good epistemology, but they don't advocate for that epistemology. I hope that answered the question. If not, you can ask a follow-up. Should the U.S. have intervened in World War II to help Great Britain? What framework do you use to decide if it is in the interest of the U.S. to intervene? I mean, it's not easy to decide these things. I mean, everybody wants a quick and easy answer, but there is no quick and easy answer. All of these issues are complex issues that require expertise and requires people in government who know what they're doing and who are thoughtful and who are thinkers and can apply broad principles like self-defense to a complex situation like World War II. So, should we have supported Great Britain? Well, it depends on a number of things. One, do you think that the Nazis, having beaten Great Britain, would ultimately turn to the United States and threaten it? Two, what do you think the probability of the Germans developing a nuclear bomb is? Three, what do you think the probability of the Germans developing a nuclear bomb and the kind of technology that would make it possible for them to reach the United States? Four, what do you think the probability of all that happening, that they would use such a bomb before the United States could develop its own bomb, before you had a mutually assured destruction? And would mutually assured destruction apply to Nazi Germany? Now, you would have to have answers to all of that. Now, I would answer it as, yes, I think the Nazis ultimately would be a threat to the United States once they defeated Great Britain. Two, yes, there is a small probability, not a high probability, but a small probability that they could develop a nuclear bomb. Would they use it? Absolutely. Nazis, this is an evil ideology, and you could see what they've done and how many people they're willing to kill, and that they have zero respect for human life. Could they develop the ballistic technology? Again, probably. Not for certain, but probably. And then, would they abide by mutually assured destruction? You'd have to think about that. To what extent are the Nazis suicidal? To what extent would they engage in an activity even if they knew that millions of their own people would die? I think Nazis are more suicidal than communists. Right? It's part of why Hitler launched the wars that he did in ways that he did and the Soviet Union did not. It's because he was willing to die. The cause was such. It's a different kind of cause. I'd have to think about that. Anyway, you'd have to assess all that and put a probability over it and say, okay, there's a real chance that this isn't a real threat to the United States. Therefore, at the very minimum, we should support Great Britain, send them weapons, support them financially, so that they can wear down the Nazis with the hope that we don't have to enter the war. And by the way, maybe should we support the Soviets? Now, my belief is we should have not have. That not supporting the Soviets would actually have worn down the Nazis even more than supporting the Soviets. Let them get bogged down in Russia just like Napoleon did. But who we should support, when we should support them, it would have to be structured in that form. And you would have to have a strategy, and a clear strategy. And you would have to have a clear idea what you thought of the Nazis, of the communists, of Great Britain, of the different parties, and what you would do if you won. For example, I would get out. I would leave. I don't believe in the Marshall Plan. I don't believe in rebuilding countries. I don't believe in sticking around. But they didn't have that. It was a mishmash. I mean, they had more of a strategy than Donald Trump has. They were less pragmatist than Donald Trump is. But they didn't think this all through. And to the extent that they did, I think many of the stuff they did were mistaken, and as a consequence, the Soviet Union landed up controlling half of Europe after the war, which was a disaster, an absolute unmitigated disaster of an outcome coming out of World War II. Okay, the prevalence of the car is not an example of the free market. The roads were built by the government. The cities were structured around car travel as to the vision of Robert Moses' thoughts. Well, certainly, I agree that the prevalence of the car is not an example of free markets. Absolutely. I can imagine a world where there are a lot fewer cars. And indeed, where we travel by high-speed train from place to place, private high-speed train, or we have flying cars. A world in which the government never built the interstate highway system, where cities developed more around a core center, where you had much more mixed-use development and you had a lot less of suburbia, or that suburbia developed later because developers developed the roads to get us in and out of suburbia rather than the government doing it. But there's no question that the prevalence of cars, and I don't know if that the prevalence of cars is a good thing or bad thing, is a product of government. The product of the government destroying the rail system by regulating it basically from its birth in the mid-19th century, but more and more intensely over the decades, and thus destroying all innovation and investment in railroads. It's a product of the fact that cities were not allowed to grow organically, and I mean by organically through voluntary processes, through through the free markets and what developers wanted to do and where they would take a development. And real estate prices were distorted by building of highways. The whole system. Right? The whole system is distorted by government, and therefore the number of cars that we have is completely distorted. It's not based on free markets at all. Somebody here says America stole rocket engineering from Germany. Let's be very clear. Germany didn't invent rocket engineering, and America doesn't own rocket engineering. Rocket engineering is a product of scientists, of individual minds, of individual people. It's not a collectivistic thing that is owned. And we didn't steal the technology. We hired the scientists. We gave them a better offer. They came to work for the United States government instead of the German government after the war. But, other than for military purposes, I don't think they should have worked for any government. This is a question from Jennifer. Well, no, from Gail. This is Gail. Then we get Jennifer. Gail's question, the future in America. In Canada, it is against the law to operate on an alternative to government single-payer system. Doctors do it anyway and have been sued by the government. Court cases are ongoing for years. Yes, in Canada you have one system. You have a single-payer. Private insurance and private health care is banned, except I think for plastic surgery and LASIK and optional things. Because the Canadians realized what would happen if you allowed doctors to charge. That is, you would have a two-tiered system, which egalitarianism does not allow for. I don't think the Canadian model will fly in America. I think in America you'll have a two-tiered system. But just like in the UK, which has a two-tiered system, over time the private tier gets smaller and smaller and gets eroded because there's just not enough money to keep it going. And the public sector dominates. And, for example, hospitals have to be public because there's not enough volume of patients to be private. So they take in both private and public patients. So you basically, even though you're a private patient, paying private insurance, let's say, you get the same facilities and the same treatment as the public patients, and therefore you come to the conclusion, why should I pay for supplemental insurance when I'm getting exactly the same treatment? So the long term is everybody is on a public system, or such a large majority is that it doesn't make any difference. I'm hopeful that the Canadians wake up one day and start privatizing. But, I'll believe it when I see it. There's even talk about privatizing aspects of the NHS in England. Could it ever be a good idea to sign a treaty with allies for mutual defense? Yes, if the treaty is finite in time and relates to a particular enemy that you share in common. So, a treaty for mutual defense as the Nazis are on the rise, relating to that enemy, or as communism is on the rise. So, a system like NATO could be valid, particularly if you thought you weren't strong enough to take on the enemy. Now, I'm not sure the United States ever needs a treaty like that, or at least hasn't in recent decades, because it is so powerful, it doesn't need anybody's help. But help is not a bad thing. But it has to be time delimited and enemy delineated, right? It has to be limited. So if, Islamism jihadism is a threat to the United States, then, it could cite treaties with other countries to fight it together and to jointly protect one another from that particular threat. But once it's gone, the treaty is null and void. All right, I see no more Super Chat questions, so I think we'll call it a night. I need to go back and edit this video to take out all the beginning nonsense on YouTube. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Sorry for the technical glitches in the beginning. I hope you share this video, particularly the section on healthcare. I think a lot of the points I made in this video about the production side, the real danger of Medicare, is stuff you don't get in almost anywhere else. So I think it'd be valuable if more and more people heard this. It's really, really crucial to get this message out so we can defeat Medicare for all and not just use the standard Republican BS answer of who's going to pay for it, which is not the right response to Medicare for all. And of course, those of you who value what I do, I'd appreciate your support. I appreciate the support of those of you who do support me already. YaronBrookShow.com/support. You can use PayPal there, or subscribestar.com/YaronBrookShow. Either way, show your appreciation by supporting the show, even for a minimum amount. I value every one of you. Thank you all, and talk to you tomorrow, actually. Tomorrow we're going to do kind of an open Q&A. So if you have Super Chat questions, there weren't many today. If you have Super Chat questions, prepare them for tomorrow.